Thank you, Laura. I am standing between you and lunch. I know that's not a good thing to do, but it is one of the things we have to do at this point. So let's get that started. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some ideas that we've been working on around data leadership. And I'm going to pull from 3 particular surveys. I know that a lot of you like to take pictures of the screens. These are going to go way too fast, but the team has put all of these slides already into the app. So you're in great shape on that. Now, to start off with, I've been involved in 2 pieces of federal legislation over my career. That's usually not a brag, but I was able to put some teeth into the Klinger-Cohen Act, which was the one that said, we need somebody in charge of the computers. Similarly, we've also passed recently in the United States something called the FIPA, or Open Data Governance Act. You can read it very quickly here as we go through. It does, though, interestingly, force the federal government to have all of its data by default open, which means it's a very, very new process. All federal data is open by default, and non-political chief data officers are required as a part of that, which means we're going to have a professional class of CDOs in these organizations. As you interact with the federal government, they will become more and more able to talk to you about these. The law mandates at least best practices, glossaries, term banks, these kinds of things in there, and this professional class of data leaders. Now, interestingly, the penalties for not following this law are higher than HIPAA, which kind of gets everybody's attention really, really quickly. Turns out when they ask the question, what are best practices, this is what my organization, the Data Management Professional Organization, has put together over the years. It's the DIMBOK, and you'll see the DIMBOK wheel. Some of you may be seeing this for the first time, but we're working hard on it. Now, let's take a specific example from a manufacturing organization. This is Nike, no particular association with them. But Zion Williams was a star, and he was showing off his brand new Zion Williams Nike branded sneakers. Anybody remember how this went?
Zion Williamson's Nike sneaker busted open on the court less than a minute into Duke's Wednesday night game. The star forward went down hard, and so did Nike. The company's stock sliding on the news, closing the day down nearly a point, losing an estimated $1 billion in value.
Not good news, correct? What happens when an organization encounters one of these oopsie moments out there is that they start to look and say, okay, we've got a problem in manufacturing, and it's probably related, we need to get some data around that. So they look in a little spot here and say, okay, that's great. And of course, it always finds out the data never really was here, it was over here. And then we find out we're dependent on external sources for this data, and eventually diving into something called dark data. Dark data is the data that you have, and it's been referenced several times, that you don't really know or are accessing at this point in time. I contend that all organizational challenges have data roots. And so we need more and more people to be paying attention to this. Now, this is a description of a CDO. Please don't try and read it right at this level. It's just not really a good way to do it. In the past, it's been about here between digital and data officers. So CDO is either chief digital officer or chief data officer. Lately, it's gone like this. Digital has far surpassed. There are twice as many chief digital officers out there as there are chief data officers. Let's just take a quick look through it, though. We need senior leadership. We need somebody that's sitting with the rest of you all around the table in order to do this. We need to be looking at a remit that is not just about data people, but it's about all of your knowledge workers in your organization. That there needs to be an understanding that these knowledge workers are caring for in a fiduciary relationship, caring for your organizational data assets that you have. And that there is a huge amount of organizational data debt in most organizations. And in order to do that, we have to focus on the value chain. That's been a constant theme all morning long as we've gone through this. So let's take a look at how we walk through this, who is going to be involved. And most of your senior data leaders are having some challenges out there. There's someone in charge for certain, but there's a little bit of frustration because they want to do some things data, but the organizational priorities haven't been lined up along those lines, and they're not certain what steps to take next. Of course, we're also tossing them into an environment where we have a CDO and a CIO. That leads for a little bit of conflict in most organizations. So I wrote this book 10 years ago talking about how to do it, but when it got translated into Chinese, the title came out, Chief Data Officer Combat. So we all, I think, agree that we need to have a top data job, and some organizations call it a CDO, some call it an enterprise data executive, but you do have somebody in your organization that's already filling this role, whether it's formal or not. And they're looking around at concepts like data governance and other types of things. But what we really understand is that the CIO's remit has expanded in a great capacity over the last couple of years, and asking them to do more with data is not a value-added proposition. We need somebody focused specifically on data leveraging in order to do this. We need them unconstrained by an IT project mindset, which is what the CIO has been working towards for all of these years. And they need to report into the business because data people don't tend to understand how their data impacts the business in that. We're also seeing that the average chief data officer lasts about 18 months. On the other hand, the chief information officer is only lasting between 2 and 4 years. So we're catching up, perhaps, in that area, getting a little bit better looking at that. These are some wonderful statistics. I've got all the sources here again for you, but the most important piece out of this, you can see most organizations are not competing on data and analytics. They're not managing data as a business asset. They're having trouble with culture. I know we've got a panel coming up on that in just a little bit, but I want to show you the real key from this is when asked over time, are your data problems primarily people and process related or technology related? The answer in 2018 was 80-20. Again, just flipping through these numbers very, very quickly here, you can see that this has not changed over time. If you're investing $1 in technology, you need to invest $4 to make sure that technology is used in a way that's appropriate for your organizations. 80% of these are focused on it, and data governance is the only role you have in your organizations that's designed to help people do better with this. There's no uniform reporting structure for CDOs. You can see here, this is a Deloitte survey, but they're all over the place. Good news, though, we're seeing more and more CDOs start to get up to corporate boards, and that's an important piece on this. Every knowledge worker in the organizations is working with data. What do we teach them about data? Generally nothing. Now, I'm mad at my colleagues in the academic community because we've been agitating this for many, many years. Because 100% of knowledge workers work with data. It seems like there's a good opportunity in there. And even worse, when you look at what we've taught our IT people, we've taught them one course on how to build a brand new Oracle database. Oracle, because it's still free. Okay, if it costs more than a penny in our organizations, we're not going to be able to do this. And management, leadership, you guys get the impression that I don't need these data people here unless they're building a new database. And of course, you have tons and tons of data activities that are operating in there. Data is not broadly or widely understood, just like the blind people approaching the elephant. And in data, it's the same way. We get warehousing, dashboards, all sorts of things that come in here that tell us these various bits and pieces. And it's no surprise that lots of organizations make oopsies around their data. But if we have the situation that we currently seem to have in most organizations, business decision makers and technical decision makers are not data knowledgeable. They lead to bad data decisions, which leads to poor treatment of the organizational assets and poor quality data and poor organizational outcomes. Now, manufacturing is actually above the rest of the organization. I sampled Morgan Freeman in there a couple times just to make sure everybody gets the point. When God says this is wrong, pay attention, right? Installing Salesforce by January 1st, because it's an IT goal, is a great idea, but Salesforce is really mad at you for doing that because you usually fill it full of rubbish data. And then they can't tell the difference between Salesforce full of bad data and Salesforce actually working properly, which it does work in pretty good software. Data is a topic that's very complex and detailed, and quite frankly, most outsiders don't want to hear about this. And most are underqualified with respect to architecture and engineering, and it's taught very inconsistently around the world on this. The focus is on technology, and the business impact is ignored, which means that data as a topic is not well understood by your workforce, and they learn it on their own. Every one of your work groups out there has learned data. That's the definition of a work group, is that they can exchange data easily. And consequently, when you ask somebody to go off and learn how to play the piano, you get results like this. You do not want your workers to be doing this. You want your workers to be learning the fastest, most effective way to use data to help you achieve your organizational strategy. A couple of ways of understanding the stress that our knowledge workers are under. 33% of knowledge worker time is spent recreating existing knowledge, only 10% on new knowledge. So this gets to the last panel where they were talking about the meaningfulness of work. 53% of your workforce would rather do household chores or pay bills than use your content repositories. 74% of them report feeling overwhelmed or unhappy when working with this, and 1/3 of them spend at least 1 hour a week procrastinating about these data-related tasks. When we look at young people, 14% of them have a good understanding how to use business data. Our young workforce, while they are literate and they are playing with their rectangles, they're not prepared to help you out in your organizations. Business decision makers, though, it's even worse. 24% feel fully confident in their ability to do things. 1/3 are able to create measurable data. 27% say they produce actionable insights. And I love this one. When I'm sitting around a table with executives, I can say to them straight, all of you would pay me under the table to make you more data literate. Let's not do it under the table. Let's all get serious about this and start working on it together. Because when you hand good data to people that don't know what to do with it, 48% of them defer to a gut decision. And when we go to C-levels, 2/3 of them go to a gut level decision. 36% say they'd find an alternate way of completing the task. I'm quite puzzled as to what that is. I do know what this one is, though. 14% ignore the task entirely. Again, not what we want to do. So we're seeing data leadership come up into 3 areas. If you're in a compliance role, that's pretty straightforward. But there's an operationally focused CDO that obviously is going to be focused on efficiencies, and a strategic CDO that's going to be focused on innovation. They are not the same, and we shouldn't try to get them to do all of this at once. If we look at the general focus on innovation, we have innovation going up to the top and efficiencies going across the bottom. You've seen a lot of these charts. Of course, we don't want to do nothing. Everybody's agreed to that. So that's okay. We can get rid of that one. Then, pick Walmart as a fine company. I did 3 years with them. They're very interesting. And they have efficiency and effectiveness down pretty well. Apple claim is an innovative company. Okay. Now I want you to imagine Johnny Ive, who's the guy that takes the spinning iPhone, beautiful piece, and tell him to be efficient and effective. His mind's going to explode. And the same thing's going to happen here with Walmart. If you ask those guys that are focused on efficiency and effectiveness and ask them to be innovative, it doesn't tend to happen. So pick one. Don't try to do both at the same time. And actually makes sense to use the savings that you have over there and use that to fund the innovative activities that you want to go forward on. IBM claims in their survey, most recent one, just hot off the presses here, that 8% of CDOs are really value creator. They are able to define a clear line of sight. They are able to use investments in data to generate business growth. They're able to take data as being central to their business models that they're looking at. And they have an engaged ecosystem in that area. These are just some of the savings that we're looking at. If we add them all up, it's a total of 40 days annually for your knowledge workers that are out there, or about a 16% lift in improvement productivity that can be gained from all of this. How do we do this? Well, we have to understand fiduciary responsibilities. We have to be able to train people on elevator stories that they need to have. Oh, I got a typo in there. It's terrible. They've got to be able to demonstrate value, and they also have to realize we're all swimming in the same swimming pool in order to do that. Fiduciary responsibilities is not something that tends to be taught in college and university, which means you're going to have to introduce it to them as they go through that. Again, 3 key factors. There's a vision for how this, whatever type of CDO that you pick of, is going to do. There's some control that you have in order to do it. You've got to be able to have exercise on this. And you've got to be able to have influence, which means you've got to be able to communicate extraordinarily well with not just up and down, but across all of these things in order to come up with value leadership success on this. There's a lot of definitions of data governance. I blow past them because most people don't really like to talk about data governance. I use 4 words: managing data with guidance. If we're not managing data with guidance, then one of the questions is, what are we in fact doing? However, as we go further up the management chain, we have to change it slightly and make it not just managing data, but managing data decisions with guidance. And that's the part that our boards and our C-levels need to be educated to so that they do understand it would make sense to postpone implementation of Salesforce until we've at least got a known set of quality data that goes into that process. There's a lot of data rot out there. We'll talk about that in just a second, but this is how we've taught people for years how to build systems. These are the systems that you are using at this point. You have some strategy, you have some IT projects, and data and information. Somebody mentioned this morning they're skipping a lot of steps even if you do just this, but we now need to switch this around. This is wrong. And of course, it's easy to change it in a PowerPoint slide, but this is where the data culture piece comes in. There's a huge amount of change that needs to occur in these areas. And we can't really visualize the cost of data debt, although I can tell you if you move to the cloud, your cloud bill is probably a minimum of 20% over padding in these areas. When I talk about data rot, it's data that is redundant, obsolete, or trivial. Why are you spending money on it? It's a really good question. Here's a puzzle that they've had for the airlines for a little while. During the middle of the pandemic, American Airlines and United were valued by the market at $6 and $9 billion annually, but the data in them, of course, is valued at tens of billions of dollars more. Gosh, if I was a venture capitalist or something, I would buy American Airlines for $6 billion and then sell it again to somebody else for $6 billion, but keep the data and have some fun with that. Sounds like a good little piece. This whole concept of Pareto analysis applies very much to data. 80% of your data, again, is redundant, obsolete, or trivial. It's of unknown quality. It is standards free. It means you've got somebody trying to do your spreadsheet by throwing pink balls at a piano that's on the floor. Entertaining, but not useful to you all. Your highly paid data analytics resources are spending 80% of their time working under these conditions. And the dependency on high-speed automation only increases the risk and the cost of sand getting into your well-oiled machines that are out there. So what do we need to do? Well, no practical responsibility for most CDOs on monetization, on the value piece. That's a problem. Organizations that can get out in front of that can achieve that sustained competitive advantage that they're looking for. I know most of you don't remember Dilbert from the old days. He's politically incorrect these days, but it was still a fun thing here. So here's a company that has a room full of 100 PhDs in chemical engineering. Each of them costs $100,000. That's a $10 million a year investment in order to do this. They asked us to come in and take a look at this. They're making, again, all sorts of fuel additives and this sort of thing for their engines. And when they have a thing that they think they want to do, they go downstairs to the basement and they run it in an engine. It's kind of a fun little organization. So they're trying to help things burn cleaner, smoother, machines last longer. These tests cost upwards of $25,000 in order to run them, and they run hundreds of thousands of these tests through the life of the company. So we looked at what the knowledge workers, these 100 chemical PhDs, were doing in there and found out there were all sorts of problems. I won't go through them with you on this, but taking this group of chemical PhDs, how much data education do you think they had? Goose eggs, right? So not knowing this, they wouldn't know something about Y2K. And the key for this is that once you improve this, on this $10 million a year investment, the company claims to get a $25 million improvement in their productivity. Personally, I question the numbers, but they're the ones they gave me, so we'll go with them here. We need to motivate data literacy for knowledge workers. You can improve your organization's data. In fact, you must improve your organization's data because it points to where valuable things are. It has intrinsic value in and of itself, and it has wonderful combinatorial value. But if you don't improve the way your people use the data, you're going to be left with a less than full cup. Valuing data because data is used to measure, manage, and motivate change around this. And in order to get both of those pieces up, I'm going to tell you a quick little story about Rolls-Royce. Now, Rolls-Royce makes these very large plane engines that carry us around safely over the globe, and we're real happy about that, and we don't tend to think about them. They know a whole lot about it. The old model of Rolls-Royce was it sold things to the airlines. Unfortunately, that kept them on the opposite side of the table. The new model is that they now sell hours of powered thrust. They are now on the same side of the table as the airlines. That is a huge transformation. Rolls-Royce doesn't make money unless the airline makes money. Okay. Why did they do this? They wanted to have additional conversations with the airlines that they were unable to have because the airline said, you sell us big engines and they work perfectly. That's a great thing. But Rolls-Royce said, yeah, but I've learned some things. And this power by the hour thing, we can start to learn from NASCAR. Actually, it was Formula One, but okay, we'll get it down there. If there's no payment for downtime, Rolls-Royce wants to get involved in helping change engines on planes faster. Where can they learn from this? This is how the Indianapolis 500 used to change
But
tires.
Holland comes in for a pit stop. Time to refuel and change tires. Lou Moore himself changes the tires. Only 4 crew members, including the driver, are allowed to work on the car. It's a tense time. Holland stays in his seat, anxious to get away. Let's watch.
I'll shorten it.
The tires are changed at last. A crewman polishes the windshield as Holland moves away just 67 seconds after he stopped.
Measures 2 tires, 67 seconds. Don't blink on this next one. Wouldn't it be great the next time you go through O'Hare that they could switch an engine out on you that fast? I think I hear some desire for that. They call this wing to wing, and they're working very carefully with the people who they couldn't hold a conversation with before about this. So when was this model invented? Rolls-Royce invented this in 1962. Ooh, not bad, right? And more importantly, their supply chain, they're looking at $1.5 billion savings annually from not keeping parts on their engines around that they don't need to have. One last little component on this, no practical responsibility and data leadership for AI. That's a bad idea. There's lots of AI failures. There is a famous one that said if you present at the emergency department with a combination of pneumonia and asthma, the AI system said you were going to have a good outcome. What the AI system didn't understand was any physician would take somebody with those 2 combinations and put them directly in the intensive care unit. Just happened to miss that on the AI. Or recognition systems that can't see certain individuals. This movie is on Netflix. Coded Bias is recommended. It's mandatory for all of my students, but everybody in your organization should see it as well. We've been running our Justice Department with a fake AI system that talks about whether people are going to be showing up for their court dates or not. And then there's Tesla. Now, this is 20 seconds of Tesla trying to figure out what's in front of this red car. If you can see it, it's a horse and buggy that's up in front. But watch the Tesla screen here as it goes through and figures this out. Horse and buggy, pedestrian, semi-truck. Okay, semi-truck must be right. Yeah, I think I've got it locked in there, right? Okay. Oh, wait. Semi-truck sideways, pickup truck, semi-truck, oncoming semi-truck, pedestrian following a semi-truck. Now, of course, what the problem here is that the people who were creating this thought they could think of every possibility. We need to make them understand we don't know the answer to a lot of questions, and that what should have happened was this Tesla software should have clicked in and said, other. And what should other trigger? Caution. It's just not existing in that environment. AI started in the early 50s after Alan Turing got involved in this. And I just want to show you, this is the actual proposal for the original AI piece. The attempt has always been to simulate intelligence, not to actually be intelligent about that. But we've seen AI go through its ups and downs. These are what are called the AI winters. How are we going to avoid the next AI winter? Because it's going to come sooner or later. Well, 1997, Deep Blue beat Garry Kasparov. Cool. Remember Watson? IBM was going to invest in Watson, and Watson was going to be everything.
Bob Dylan To improve my language skills, I've read all your lyrics.
You've read all of my lyrics.
I can read 800 million pages per second.
That's fast.
My analysis shows your major themes are that time passes and love fades.
That sounds about right.
I have never known love.
Maybe we should write a song together.
I can sing.
You can sing?
Doobie bop a doo. Doobie doobie doo. Do. Doobie doo.
You don't hear much about Watson these days, do you? It's in there still, but it's not. By the way, does anybody know what the term CEO stood for between 1880 and 1940? The answer was Chief Electrification Officer. So it's possible that our data leaders will be a temporary role in order to do this. But we need senior data leadership. We need it focused on every knowledge worker in the organization. We need to make them understand how these fiduciary responsibilities come out. Went back too fast, goodness. And we also need to understand how and where to eliminate the data rot and improve data value along with it. And we are time for lunch. I thank you guys very much.